We hope you're done. Okay, good. Dear devotees, thank you so much. Today we have His Grace DAYAL MORA Prabhu, and he's going to be discussing the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM discourse with us today. So we all welcome him to Hare Krishna Africa platform. So Prabhuji, if you're ready, we'll put the verse on the screen, and then you may begin giving the class.
Okay, ready when you are.
All right, thank you.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, reading from the SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM, Canto 1, Chapter 18, verse number 47. Thank you for having me here on the ISKCON African live stream class. I am your humble servant, Dayal Mordas from ISKCON London, and I will be attempting today to speak upon this verse, which is as follows. Apapeshu swabrityeshu balene parvakabutina papankritam te bhagavan sarvatma kshantamarhasi. So maybe we don't need to do the synonyms, I guess. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon his immature boy who had no intelligence and who committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate and who deserved to be protected. Purport. Everyone is responsible for his own action, either pious or sinful. Rishi Shamika could foresee that his son had committed a great sin by cursing Maharaj Parikshit, who deserved to be protected by the Brahmanas, for he was a pious ruler and completely free from all sins because of his being a first-class devotee of the Lord. When an offense is done unto the devotee of the Lord, it is very difficult to overcome the reaction. The Brahmanas, being at the head of the social orders, are meant to give protection to their subordinates and not to curse them. There are occasions when a Brahmana may furiously curse a subordinate Kshatriya or Vaishya, etc. But in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, there were no grounds, as already explained. The foolish boy had done it out of sheer vanity in being a Brahmana's son, and thus he became liable to be punished by the law of God. The Lord never forgives a person who condemns his pure devotee. Therefore, by cursing a king, the foolish Shringi had committed not only a sin, but also the greatest offense. Therefore, the Rishi could foresee that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save his boy from his sinful acts. He therefore directly prayed for pardon from the Supreme Lord, who alone can undo a thing which is impossible to change. The appeal was made in the name of a foolish boy who had developed no intelligence at all. A question may be raised herein that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put into that awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was a Brahmana's son made responsible for this offensive act? The answer is that the offensive act was performed by a child only, so that he could be excused very easily, and thus the prayer of the father was accepted. But if the question is raised, why the Brahmana community as a whole was made responsible for allowing Kali into the world affairs, the answer is given in the Varaha Purana, that the demons who acted inimically towards the personality of Godhead, but were not killed by the Lord, were allowed to take birth in the families of Brahmanas to take advantage of the age of Kali. The all-merciful Lord gave them a chance to have their births in the families of pious Brahmanas so that they could progress towards salvation. But the demons, instead of utilizing the good opportunity, misused the Brahminical culture due to being puffed up by vanity in becoming Brahmanas. The typical example is the son of Shamika Rishi, and all the foolish sons of Brahmanas are warned hereby not to become as foolish as Shringi, and be always on guard against the demoniac qualities which they had in their previous births. The foolish boy was, of course, excused by the Lord, but others who may not have a father like Shamika Rishi will be put into great difficulty if they misuse the advantages obtained by birth in a Brahmana family. Homa Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shilakaya Chakshur Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yana Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakambitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dino Bando Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabandhu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavinebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Sari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Apapeshu Savrityeshu Balena Papa Pudina Papam Kritam Tad Bhagavan Sarvatma Kshantam Arhati. Then the Rishi prayed to the all-pervading personality of Godhead to pardon this immature boy who had no intelligence and who committed the great sin of cursing a person who was completely free from all sins, who was subordinate and who deserved to be protected. Hare Krishna. So thank you again for inviting me onto this forum. It's a great honor for me to be here. I feel very insignificant and unqualified because I saw the lineup of different speakers, and I'm very small in comparison to these great souls. So please forgive my lack of qualification, but I will do my best the mercy of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, to speak something for all of our benefits based upon the teachings of the previous acharyas. So this is a very important part. Of course, in one sense, all aspects of the Srimad Bhagavatam are very important. But this is the important part in the sense of the story of how the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken by Shukadeva Goswami, how Maharaj Parikshit made the decision to give up his kingdom, to walk away from family life, walk away from the opulences, the prestige, the honor of being a king, to take upon his head the curse of a Brahmana boy as a benediction, to die within 7 days, to spend that time wisely on the bank of the Ganges, listening to Srimad Bhagavatam from the bona fide authority, Shukadeva Goswami. So we know that Parikshit Maharaj, being a Kshatriya, is needed for him to be trained and to express his, aggressive side, hunting animals to maintain the forests, so there are safe places for the brahmanas, for the yogis to do their practices. So I've heard that in the forest there would be the central area of the jungle, which was left for the animals, the wild animals, to inhabit peacefully in their own way. And then there was an outer section of the jungle, which is where the yogis and the Brahmins would live. And so that area, it was considered fair game for the Kshatriyas to come there and to practice their military skills in hunting various wild animals, challenging lions with a sword, simply challenging big animals, very powerful beasts, and in that way testing their bravery, testing their strength, but also doing a nice service for the Brahmanas by keeping that area of the forest free from danger so that they can sit there for days, months, years on end without being eaten by tigers and lions and so forth. So Parikshit Maharaj, doing his duty, his bona fide duty as a Kshatriya king, was very thirsty. He comes into the house of Shanika Rishi. No response when he asks simply for some water. And so therefore in disgust, naturally we know this was a pastime. So the Lord, using his mystic powers, using his being in the heart of every living entity, brought about this very unusual situation where Parikshit Maharaj lost his cool. Generally, Parikshit Maharaj was too cool for school. There wasn't any chance that he would get so upset by such an insignificant matter. But in this case, he did become very upset. So he took up a snake, dead snake, placed it around the neck of the Rishi as an insult and walked out in a huff. Of course, already on the way back home, he realized he made a mistake. How did I do this? How did this come over me? But by then it was too late, because the son of the Rishi had already cursed him. Now, Prabhupada, in the purport we just read, explains that it was out of sheer vanity that the Brahman boy cursed Maharaj Parikshit. Puffed up, vanity, due to my higher birth, my prestige, all my younger friends have witnessed me receiving the news of my father being mistreated so much by Parikshit Maharaj. So now it behooves me, for the dignity of my lineage, to show my true strength, my true power over the Kshatriyas who are so proud themselves. Let me put them in their place by cursing the sinless king, Maharaj Parikshit. So the acharyas explain that this, in one sense, was the onset of the age of Kali. Other definitions are given. The moment that Krishna left this mortal world is also given as the moment Kali Yuga began. But the idea is that the degradation of the Brahmana, Varna, began at that moment when this curse was levied upon the sinless Parikshit Maharaj. And what's very interesting, what stood out for me in the purport was that Parikshit Maharaj was a subordinate. He was a subordinate to this Brahmin boy, because the Brahmins in those times were very respected, very revered. And so they were considered like the fathers, and the Kshatriyas were like their sons. And so the Brahmanas had a responsibility to care for the well-being of the Kshatriyas, even though the Kshatriyas were huge, very muscular, very ripped, very strong and skillful warriors, completely fearless, but still they were dependent upon the mercy of the Brahmanas for their education, for their health, for all the ceremonial aspects of their lives, for general advice in day-to-day activities, whether that be running the kingdom, or running a family, or maintaining the health and happiness of the citizens. Whatever it may be, military arts, the go-to guys were those Brahmins. And without good Brahmins, then how can you run a good kingdom? It wasn't possible. So that dependency, that relationship was understood, that culture of mutual respect and understanding of each other's positions was a very, very significant aspect of ancient civilizations, which today, of course, is very much lacking. So this Brahmin boy decided to punish his subordinate, Maharaj Parikshit. Naturally, we know that his father then found out and was very much lamenting what had occurred. He prayed to the Lord to forgive his son. And so it's written that the Lord naturally overlooked the offense of the young boy. He didn't know any better, he's just a kid. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a sinful reaction, but at least it wasn't Vaishnav aparad anymore. The Lord forgave him. So then Maharaj Parikshit, getting that news, took it as a benediction and went to the river. So I wanted to speak about this principle a little bit of the dependency, the mutual interdependency of traditional Vedic society. How that would apply in the modern context is another thing we can also discuss. But this idea of mutual interdependency, that we are dependent, and that it is this mutual dependency that is actually our pathway to freedom, to emancipation. Generally, we understand that our helplessness begins, at least in the conscious state, from the moment we are born, the child screaming, coming out into the material world from the nice, well, maybe perhaps not so nice, comfort of the womb. A strong sense of protection and attachment is experienced by the parents to look after this child. That sense of desiring to protect and maintain a child is a very natural feeling, and is a very good thing. Of course, we know that when we read the histories of the Puranas, Srimad Bhagavatam in the 7th canto, Prahlad Maharaj, when he is being bullied, picked on by his teachers, by his father, who attempts to kill him in so many ways, that it invokes in the Lord this sense of protectiveness, affection, wanting to do good for his devotee. We also see that in the case of Draupadi, when in her most desperate hour, when she's being attempted disrobing in the court of the Kauravas, at that last moment, the utter dependency upon the Lord is expressed by throwing her hands in the air and saying, "Hey Govinda, please, hey Govinda." And so Govinda comes and gives her an unlimited amount of sari. Because at some point, one has to fall on one's knees and beg the Lord for protection. Because ultimately, to some degree or another, the fact that we are in this material world and struggling in the three modes of material nature means that to some degree or another, we are great fools. Instead of being grateful we've become great fools. We've turned away from the Lord's loving embrace, his protection, and we've become very proud, perhaps illusions, and thinking ourselves very excellent, we've become very incompetent, useless. And although it seems perhaps this isn't such a good thing to think, but the Vaishnava considers himself the most useless person in the existence of the creation. Because in the Western countries, that's a slight problem, because we have a problem over here. It's called self-esteem. A lot of kids today have serious self-esteem issues. This has been fueled by the social media revolution. So being beaten down by the hopes and dreams, completely unrealistic hopes and dreams of what we're going to achieve in this lifetime. And gradually, as time goes on, we realize we're never going to get those things. We're never going to be that person who we hope, who we want to be. We feel crushed, completely unhappy, lonely, and I feel like we can't even make any progress in this world at all. So we're not talking about a self-esteem issue. Self-esteem issues is more of a modern lifestyle disease. People in the Vedic age, they didn't have that problem so much. At least we don't hear about it in our scriptures. No, but these people genuinely consider themselves the lowest of mankind, the most useless, most wretched. And you hear about that if you listen to the songs of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and how he explains his own position. It's very eye-opening. Okay, so we understand that we are not the doers. Ahankara vimuratma katamiti manyate. It's the three modes of material nature doing everything. We are not the doers, but we are experiencing in this material world. And we are given the formula by which we can experience this material world. We are given the instruction booklet, how we can navigate this machinery. And that is Trinadapi Sanichana Taroapi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadina Kitaniya Sadahari. We can chant constantly if we are just humble, become lower than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. Don't always expect respect, but be ready to offer respect to all others in such a state of mind. One can chant the holy name of the Lord, be lower than a worm in stool. This is our process that's been given by Lord Chaitanya himself. Of course, we understand that Parikshit Maharaj was far from helpless himself, but he was very humble. It's even written that he was such a powerful Vaishnava, if he wanted to overturn the curse that was put upon him, he could have easily done so. But he didn't. He accepted it in all humility as a great benediction. So it's interesting that this point that to become free, to become utterly free, one has to become completely dependent upon the Lord. Haridas Thakur was practically invincible. It seems it was impossible to kill him. He was being beaten in 22 marketplaces over and over again, but he was impossible to kill him. In fact, the guards had to beg him, please die. If you don't die, then we're going to be in trouble. Perhaps the emperor, the Mughal, Nawab, or whoever it was, he's going to kill us. So please, we've beaten you so many times, just die, please, we beg you. They were practically crying. And so Thakur Haridas, okay, no problem, I will die. And so he put himself into a trance, which looked just like death. So then they could then say that he had died and threw him into the river, job done. How is it possible he could become so practically immortal, completely invincible, like Superman? Because of his complete dependence upon the Lord. That was his protection. And the more one takes shelter, the more protection one gets. And the same as that baby who has just been born is completely unprotected, completely helpless. So therefore, the parents are automatically forced to give as much care as they can possibly give that child the best possible opportunities in life. And as the child grows up and becomes less dependent less protection is required, then naturally less protection is given. But in our relationship with the Lord, we should understand that while we're in the material world, we need maximum protection 100% of the time. So therefore, the Vaishnava is constantly meditating upon this fact of utter dependency, utter hopelessness, and simply depending upon the Lord's mercy, the Lord's grace. So the idea then is to surrender like Parikshit Maharaj did, just accept what the Lord is providing for us, just to give it up. Nobody likes the idea of surrendering. Surrendering these days, I will never surrender. We are supporting the, many people are very much supporting, especially in the Western world, the Ukrainians right at this very moment. They will never surrender. They will fight to the last man to get the Russians off every part of their territory. We will never surrender. We will fight. We will die. And this is our attitude. We will fight. We will never surrender. And so when we come to spiritual life, sometimes this fighting spirit comes along with us. And so when perhaps situations come up which are a little difficult, we go back to our conditioned nature. We fall back onto our safety mechanism and immediately start to defend our position, defend our integrity. We'll defend our dignity and so forth. So we try to fight our way to the top of the world. And that is the Western capitalistic model of society. Life is a competition. And now there's even competition, not just at the workplace, not just at the World Cup, but also within the family group itself, where children are encouraged to compete against each other, and even parents compete against their own children. What an absurd and perverted society this is. This is animalistic, as we know. Prabhupada gives those 4 principles of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. But Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, just surrender. Sarvadharma prityaja mamekam sharanam braja. Give it all up, Arjuna. Just surrender unto me. But at the same time, fight. You must surrender and fight simultaneously. Of course, we know that is the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna had to surrender to the Lord, but it doesn't mean you just give everything up in terms of your duties. The duties still must be performed. So Arjuna's duties at that particular moment in time was to fight, to be a responsible Kshatriya, to stand up for righteousness, to perform one's duty. But ultimately, for the satisfaction of the Lord, he had to fight. And that was his surrender. Our surrender perhaps will be looking a little different, depending on our varna or ashram, the situation that we're in, and the particular type of personality we have. Our surrenders will all be unique, but the principle of surrender will always be there. Surrendering what? Surrendering what I want. Surrendering the results of my activities, the fruits of my labor. Surrender that and just simply work for Krishna's pleasure. What will come, will come. Do not worry. Give that up, but still perform your prescribed duties. So in this age, we've been given the process of Sankirtan as our mode of surrendering. We did a little surrendering yesterday, and the day before. We did a Christmas Eve Harinam, and we did a Christmas Day Harinam. And usually Christmas Day in London's quite quiet on the streets, but somehow yesterday it was quite busy. People are coming out, so we did nice Harinam in the streets. It's a little act of surrender. Book distribution, it's a little act of surrender. We don't go out expecting to get happiness for ourselves. Happiness will come. We don't have to worry about that. That's the Lord's arrangement. That's in his hands. We do our duties. We do what we are supposed to do. We do what Srila Prabhupada instructed us to do, what Lord Chaitanya instructed us to do. We go out, we preach the holy names of the Lord, whether that's through Harinam or book distribution or whatever unlimited varieties of novel means by which one can inject Krishna consciousness into the dull brains of the general public. That's our duty. And this is our surrender. So Parikshit Maharaj, he exhibited his act of surrender. His act of surrender was to give up his attachments to his family, to his position, to his very body, to his life as a king. To give that all up and perform his prescribed duties of being the perfect example of a perfect king who, once his time was up, he was ready to move on. Not being one of these golden oldie leaders who just wants to cling to positions decades and decades and decades. No, if I walk away from my position, it will all fall apart. How will they survive without me? These systems that I've put in place, this facility that I've arranged, this money that I raised, it will all be wasted. No, I have to stay in my position. I have to stay in control. Otherwise, who knows what will happen? So this is all vanity. Parikshit Maharaj had no vanity at all. He very quickly, very easily, very happily gave it all up to perform his prescribed duties of going to the Ganges and hearing SRIMAD BHAGAVATAM and just waiting patiently for the snake bird or whatever creature to come and bite him and finish him off in this mortal coil that he was in. So we don't surrender, we surrender, but we don't give up our duties. We continue the good fight, not the bad fight, the good fight, the fight for the Lord, for righteousness. But we surrender our attachment to the results of our activities. That's the essence of Bhagavad Gita. And that's spoken in this beautiful song, Nadia Gajumna, Nityananda Mahajan, Nityananda Prabhu, this beautiful song. We've been given our duties to perform. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna, Shiksha. We simply have to chant Krishna's names. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, worship Krishna. And Koro Krishna, Shiksha, tell other people about Krishna. That's all we have to do. It's so easy. Give up all sins. Make Krishna your whole world. Be merciful to all souls. Chant Krishna's names. That is the essence of all religion. These are the verses given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So this Shringi, I don't know enough about him. I only know about what happened in Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's not looking good. So you could say he was a bit of a speculator, that he decided on his own strength without any reference to seniors, authorities or scripture. He just decided on his own what the proper activity was. So there's always going to be these kind of persons. The purport explains that particularly in Brahmin families in Kali Yuga, demons are taking birth in Brahmin families. Yes. Why? Because only in Kali Yuga are they qualified to take birth in Brahmin families, so they're given a chance. We're currently in human forms, human bodies. It's only because of Kali Yuga we've become qualified to even be humans. We're so proud. So Shringi was very proud to be a Brahmana. This demonic tendency, which is in the heart of all of us, because no longer do the demons live on different worlds or on different continents or in different cities, but they live in the same heart of everybody. That demonic tendency is always there. So constant vigilance is required to make sure that we're feeding the good dog and not the bad dog, as some of our authorities have described this principle of the two dogs fighting. I think it's from an indigenous American tradition, spiritual tradition, that there's always this good and bad side. So Shringi somehow allowed the bad dog to win he was feeding the bad dog. The bad dog got stronger and was able to overpower the good dog, and therefore he uttered this curse. So we have to be careful not to speculate. We have to be very firm in our convictions, that we don't try to interpret the instructions given to us by our previous acharyas. What Srila Prabhupada has given us should be our life and soul. We shouldn't try to break the faith of others in the purports of Srila Prabhupada, because we are not qualified to understand these scriptures. What do we know? Because we know we have Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, and Shastra is the basis. But at the same time, for us, you could argue, actually, Guru and Sadhu are more important. How can you say that? Shastra is the basis, and many devotees use this as an argument in our wranglings, what we should do in ISKCON, what we shouldn't be doing. But actually, without the Guru and the Sadhu to explain the scriptures, how can you understand them? If it wasn't for Prabhupada's purpose, we wouldn't have a clue what is going on. The essence of Bhagavad Gita, the essence of SRIMAD Bhagavatam. Where would we be? How is it that only Bhagavad Gita as it is made thousands of devotees and none of the other 600 odd versions made a single devotee? How is that? Because of Prabhupada's purpose. Because he explained the Bhagavad Gita. He explained the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Who on earth would understand Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu without Prabhupada's explanations? Impossible. So for us, you can argue that actually Guru and Sadhu is more important. That way we understand from their interpretations how we should understand these scriptures. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that dry arguments are inconclusive. A great personality whose opinion does not differ from others is not considered a great sage. Simply by studying the Vedas, which are variegated, one cannot come to the right path by which religious principles are understood. And this is the important part. The solid truth of religious principles is hidden in the heart of an unadulterated, self-realized person. Consequently, the Shastras confirm one should accept whatever progressive path the Mahajans advocate. So Lord Chaitanya here in this verse, this is Madhya Lila 17.186, he's explaining that actually we shouldn't go so easily to the scriptures directly. Of course, we should study the scriptures, but we should understand that the truth of those scriptures, we cannot understand it. It's in the heart, it's hidden in the heart of the Mahajans. It's hidden in the heart of the self-realized sadhus. Srila Prabhupada was one such self-realized sadhu Mahajan. So we should understand, we should take his purports, we should blindly accept them and surrender to his instructions. In this way, like a child, completely helpless and dependent upon their parents, Srila Prabhupada will feel naturally so much more kindness and mercy will be directed towards us. This utter dependency upon the mercy of the acharyas is what will reveal within us the purports of their explanations. So the solid truth is hidden in the heart of Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada's heart has been written down in his purports, the Bhaktivedanta purports. Srila Prabhupada's heart has been printed into these books. And when we're out on book distribution, on the streets, in the heat, in the cold, in the wind, the rain, and the snow over here, this is Prabhupada's heart. And we're just taking a little donation. Who can imagine what mercy is being given out during these Christmas marathon periods? For the greater good, for the upliftment of humanity. And these books are so important. Who can imagine the mercy? So we can reflect upon what we are actually doing when we are performing Sankirtan, what we are actually giving people. We are not even fully aware of what we're doing. But it is amazing. It is amazing. So this is our mission. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. Chant Krishna's names, worship Krishna, tell other people about Krishna. We're in good company. Haridas Thakur and Nityananda Prabhu would personally go door to door and beg people to chant. Bhaktivinoda Thakur would personally go door to door and beg people to chant the holy name. We're in good company. We have all protection to the degree that we are dependent upon the mercy of the Mahajans, and then all protection will be there. We should have faith in this. As Parikshit Maharaj also had complete faith that if he became completely dependent upon the mercy of the Lord, there would be no inauspiciousness. Only everything good for the entire world would be the result of his surrender. Hare Krishna. So that was my little class. I hope it was okay. It's my first time here. So thank you very much. I'm completely dependent upon your kindness. And so I'll hand it over now to our host for today to pick it up from here.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, His Grace Dayal MORA Prabhu. Lots of insights and lots of lessons to learn how to be submissive and humble. Thank you so much for the class. Dear devotees, if anyone has a question, you may indicate by using the hand emoji or your physical hand, and you'll be asked to unmute to ask your question. Okay. Prabhuji, I have a question. Well, again, I say thank you so much for the class. But the question I have is, you were saying in the course of the presentation that devotees consider themselves most useless. And I was with a contrary opinion. And of course, it's just my opinion, and who am I? I'm just a very little fig sitting here. I think that non-devotees are actually useless, whereas devotees are useful. So I would want you to explain a little bit more on what you meant by devotees being useless. And the reason I'm asking this is because I am thinking that there is a difference between being humble and being useless. If someone is humble, does not necessarily mean that he is useless. So if you may shed a little bit more light on that. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Sure. Thank you for your question. It's a very nice question. Yeah, I mean, devotees are definitely not useless. They're useful in the service of the Lord, and they are the only ones doing anything useful in that sense. Completely agree with you. At the same time, you could say the karmis are also quite useful in the sense that they are also servants of the Lord. They're not conscious of that fact, but they are inflicting upon one another their karmic reactions. They are serving. They are all the servants. They can also act as mouthpieces to the Lord also. We can accept teachings from the mouth of anybody. There's the 22 or however many gurus in the 11th canto, right? So many gurus we can have. Even Bhuvamangala Thakur's guru was a prostitute. So nobody is completely useless in that sense. But the devotee feels he is useless. Like you said at the beginning of the question yourself, I'm just like a fig. I'm nothing. So that humility, he feels useless. But everybody knows that actually he's the most useful. He's the greatest. And that's what makes him great. because he doesn't consider himself anything. There's that nice story from Plato, Republic. The Apology, where Socrates is being accused of corrupting the youth because he keeps asking too many questions, uncomfortable questions, right? And making them think. And, that's a terrible thing to do. And so he's asked to defend himself. And so he says, well, I was accused of being the wisest man in Athens. And I didn't agree with being the wisest man in Athens. I always thought I was a fool. So I went and did a little survey around, and I spoke to the politicians, the artisans, the engineers, the military men. I spoke to the scientists, and I asked them all a set of questions, and I found that they were all extremely expert in their particular fields. But when I asked them something outside of their specialization, they would always behave as if they knew and speak as if they knew everything, but actually they didn't know very much at all. And so what my conclusion was that I'm not the wisest man in Athens because I know everything. I'm the wisest man because I know I don't know anything. That's what makes me wise. And so I always thought that was very interesting. And a Vaishnava is like that, because how much do we know, really? Yes, we've maybe read the Bhagavatam, the CC, perhaps we're a little bit spiritually advanced, but compared to the unlimited, ever-expanding pastimes of Radha and Krishna in the spiritual world, how can we possibly understand these things? So the more the Vaishnava learns, the more he realizes how insignificant he is. And so that humility then drives the realization of more knowledge. And that more knowledge, again, feeds his humility. It makes him more humble. And so therefore the most advanced are the most humble. And the most humble, of course, we know is Srimati Radharani herself, who always considers herself lower than everybody else. And what to speak of Krishna, who's willing to wash the feet of everybody who comes to the Rajasurya sacrifice. So this is the symptom of a great devotee. So it's not that they're useless, no, they're the most useful, but they feel themselves to be useless.
Thank you so much for the answer. Very beautiful answer. And I am more than 100% satisfied with the answer, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's all your mercy. You gave the question.
Oh, no. Anyone else with a question or comment, please? There are lots of similarly difficult and contradictory statements from the text itself and the purport that Srila Prabhupada himself gave, because certain things Srila Prabhupada said in the purport appear contradictory to what Srila Prabhupada himself has said in other places also. So I'm expecting the devotees to try to ask questions. And one of such similar contradictions, and if I may be allowed to borrow your coin, I feel myself very useless to understanding anything. but we've gathered together to try to understand a little bit as to what we need to do to please and serve the Lord. So in that regard, my question is, Srila Prabhupada was saying in the purport that no one bears the sinful reactions of another person. I mean, right, that was the opening sentence that Srila Prabhupada gave in the purport to this text. But I think 3 or so verses back, Shamaka Rishi had mentioned to his son that because of your behavior, because of your immature behavior, we are all going to suffer. And because you have cursed this pious king to die, and therefore all of us are going to suffer. And I remember asking a question, why would Shamaka Rishi speak that way, that we all are going to suffer? Shamaka Rishi didn't do anything to offend Maharaj Parikshit, except that maybe he did not open his eyes. But Maharaj Parikshit was also questioning himself, was he faking to be in meditation or whatever? But it was his son Shringi who cursed Maharaj Parikshit, and as a result, Maharaj Parikshit had to leave his body. So if there is any consequence at all, it has to be Shringi. Why should that be Shamaka Rishi? But here, Srila Prabhupada is saying it that no one bears the sinful reactions of another person. In other words, Shamaka Rishi, being the father, is not going to bear the sinful reactions of his son. Now, I want you to help me and probably other devotees to have a better understanding. Did Shringi's immature action have any adverse effect on Shamaka Rishi being the father? Simply because he was the father, did he have any sinful reaction to what his son did?
Now you're asking me like I'm Yamaraj or something, like I have all the answers.
Oh, no. You are representative of Vyasadeva. So Vyasadeva is giving you the empowerment and the energy.
Yeah. I don't know any more than you. I only know what's written in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I can't say. Of course, the principle is that there is always a reaction. Every action has a reaction. That's a reality. So we know that it was Maha Vaishnava Aparad for Shringi to do what he did. He shouldn't have done that. So then you have this twofold reaction, the Vaishnava Aparad, and also just it's a sinful action, full stop, to another human being. So it's insinuated in the purport that Prabhupada explains that maybe it's not this purport, maybe the next one, that Samika Rishikazi prays to the Lord for forgiveness, that the Lord, kind of lets them off the hook, as in the sense that the Vaishnava Aparad section is no longer applicable in this case. But still, there will be it was a sinful thing to do. So there'll be some reaction. And we know it is also mentioned that it's the beginning of Kali Yuga. So at the beginning of the corruption of the Brahmanas. So that has to stand. There has to be reaction for what he did. And the reaction will be further vanity in the Brahmana community. What is the reaction to the innocent father of this Shringi? Does he get a reaction? Well, to some degree, I mean, we could try to understand that there must be some effect. He is the father. He is responsible for the actions of his son. He's still a child. So it's not as if he's a fully grown adult, completely responsible for himself. The father has to accept some responsibility. That's why he felt so bad personally and wanted to go and apologize to the king on behalf of his son, because he accepts that responsibility. I mean, at least in terms of his reputation amongst the other yogis, brahmanas, other saintly persons, it will not be very good that his son behaved like this. So that's a kind of reaction. But I can't speak because no more information about this is given, particularly what that reaction would look like or what it was. But we can understand that something would be there, however great or small that is. Then that's up to the Lord and his agents. So that's all I can really say on that one.
Well, Prabhuji, thank you for the answer. But see, in the purport, I think the second paragraph, let me see if I may put it on the screen for us to fully understand. Here, the second paragraph. A question may be raised herein that since it was the desire of the Lord that Parikshit Maharaj be put into that awkward position so that he might be delivered from material existence, then why was a Brahmin son made responsible for this offensive act? I find this a very legitimate question that people would ask, and so Srila Prabhupada himself is asking and then answering. Now, Srila Prabhupada's answer is that the offensive act was performed by a child only so that he could be excused very easily, and thus the prayer of the father was accepted. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada is saying is that Krishna is a very masterful actor, because he wanted this to take place, but he also made it happen through a child. And because he was a child, when his father prayed for forgiveness of committing such an offense, he was forgiven. From what Srila Prabhupada is saying. My question is, in the Bible, lots of us come from the Christian background. In the Bible, it was already ordained and predicted that Jesus Christ was going to be crucified. However, in that same phase, it was also said that woe betide anyone who would make himself the medium for such crucifixion to take place. In other words, Judas Iscariot, who betrayed Jesus Christ for him to be crucified, has to be punished. Of course, we can say that he was an adult. Here, he is a child. So my question here continues from what I asked earlier, is that if a child performs a sinful act and can be excused, what is the age range? What is the age range that we can say this person is a child? I know, for example, in observance of a Kadashi, it is said when the child is not up to, I don't remember whether 5 or 6, he is allowed not to observe. So we know that, okay, if a child is 5 years old, he may eat grains on a Kadashi day, and that is okay. But once he passes that age, he cannot. So do you perchance have any idea as to what age one could be considered a child, that if he commits an offense and is prayed for forgiveness, he will be forgiven simply because he was a child?
Yeah. So we have to be careful. Be careful not to mix some things up here, because Prabhupada separates the offense and the sin. So the offense was prayed for, and he was forgiven for the offense. That's the Vaishnava Aparad section. But the sin is, so if you want to know, this is very detailed information you're asking for. So if you read Manu Samhita, you will see the age ranges of the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas, the Vaishyas, and the Shudras, and what ages they become. They become qualified to receive punishments for particular crimes. It's all explained there. From the top of my head, I can't tell you the exact age range, but for sure the general principle is that the Brahmanas, it starts much earlier. So they are given Brahman threads, before when they're already very young, like 10, 12 years old, they're already considered like adults. So even in Vrindavan, Madhu Mangal is just a boy, but he's already giving instructions and being respected by the gopis, the cowherd girls, because that level of respectability is there even from childhood. Whereas you go through the Varnas, that changes. The Kshatriyas is still quite young. They are very respectable. but not as young as the Brahmanas, and so forth. But with that respectability comes accountability. So therefore, when they do something wrong, also when they're young, they have to be accountable for that too. But I couldn't give you the exact age group off the top of my head. But it'll be in Manu Samhita. If you have time, you can look it up. Yeah.
See, I asked this question because the question has a continuation. Because if, like you said, rightly said, the Brahmins are very much respected in society because they are the head. No, they are the head. So even though the the Kshatriyas are the rulers, but they are being governed by the Brahmins. The Kshatriyas, they are rulers, but they are governed by the Brahmins, like you said in your class. And so wouldn't it be much wiser to entrust such power into someone who is matured? Like we see in the story of this Shringi. His father was lamenting that he was immatured. And he was immatured for two reasons, because one, he was immatured in knowledge and realization or experience, but at the same time, he was immatured in age. So that goes to tell me that it is, and it will forever be wrong to follow the caste system, whereby because someone is born in a Brahmin family, he automatically becomes a Brahmin and is given the thread. Like in the case of Shringi, he was born in a Brahmin family. His father was a Brahmin, and so he became a Brahmin. He knew the art, but he did not understand it. So I am thinking, this is just my own assumption, that it is very dangerous to give very powerful and potent tools to an immature person, and therefore it does not serve society if the immatured person is given the rights to hold a position to govern. In other words, before someone is given a Brahminical initiation, that person must have been trained and some sort of maturity is being seen that this person can have this position. But that was not in the case of Shringi, according to this story we are reading. And therefore, that tells me that the caste system is actually not helpful to human society.
Take your point. Because it's worthy of note that this was the first incident of its kind when it happened. So up until that point, young Brahmana boys who were endowed with these kind of powers were acting responsibly, and the society was functioning well. But with the onset of Kali Yuga, then it was no longer a practical reality. So we also know that Chatur Vanyam Maya Shishtam Guna Kama Sabhag. So Guna and Kama, that it is not based upon birth. The one becomes a Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. That it's by quality and work. So depending upon one's psychophysical nature, then one would be identified with a particular type of work. And then also through the process of Krishna consciousness, one can become purified. One's consciousness can be elevated to become better than a Brahman. So quality and work, that's what Prabhupada gave us. That's what the Acharyas have given us. So we function on that basis. That's what the real Varnashram system was, and that's what the caste system isn't. the caste system being a relatively modern creation, which is very unnatural, and there's so much suffering as a result. But Varnashram, although it did have some rigidity, but there was also flexibility there, that if a person exhibited the genuine qualities and attributes and work of a particular Varna that they were not born into, then that's what they would be accepted as. And that would be the proper understanding, as far as I know. And
Yeah,
I'm sure you know all of this already. You're just being very kind because you want to discuss these things for the benefit of everybody. But,
no, I don't know. In fact, even if I knew, my preference has always been to understand, because I realize in life that lots of the time many people do not know, and oftentimes few people who even know do not understand. And that is my position. I know some few things, but I don't understand anything. So
I think you understand a lot. Otherwise, how could you come up with these questions?
No, because we were reading from what Prabhupada was saying. But I truly appreciate your mood of giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, and I pray and hope that I can learn your art of speaking Bhagavatam. It's very nice.
I'm learning a lot from you also. I'm learning this art of asking good questions. And this is very important, isn't it? Because this is what the sages of Naimisharanya were doing, asking perfect questions and getting the nice answers. So thank you for asking the nice questions, because it's making me think also and stretching my understanding. Appreciate it very much.
You are very merciful and kind, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Any devotee with any question, comment, realizations before we let Prabhu go? Prabhu, you are in London, right?
Yes, very cold.
Oh, it's very cold here. I mean, today is
what temperature?
You use Celsius, right? We use Fahrenheit. We are still colloquial. But let me say, today is Tuesday. Saturday we had one of the most bitter cold ever. You know, we were like having negative 15. Negative 15 degrees.
You are already missing days. Today is Monday.
Oh, today is Monday. Oh, see. Thank you so much. Yeah, so that's 3 days ago. Saturday, it was very, very cold. I will later check my conversion table to see what negative 10 degrees in Fahrenheit is in Celsius.
Sure,
but it was really cold. Very, very cold. No. I just heard on the news that somebody was found dead in the snow in one state here in the US. So I think we have Ananda, Nidan, and Prabhu with a question. Please unmute. Unmute and ask your question, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavad.
Haribol.
Okay. So, thank you very much. Prabhu, my question is, I would like to know, according to the scripture, the curse have to have an effect on Parikshit Maharaj within 7 days. And according to the scripture, the father got the news that this is what the son did. And I knew very well that when something like that, so you have to go back to the person that you have offended. So my question is, within that 7 days, is it not that time that the father heard the news that this is what the son did, and that they can go to Parikshit Maharaj and plead for forgiveness, or is within out of that 7 days before he got the news?
Okay.
I don't know if my question is clear. Because to me,
Yeah.
I think in order not, even if through by Krishna's mercy, we can still have the Bhagavatam as we are treating today, maybe that aspect of the snake bite can be taken off. Or is it still that there is nothing can be done? I don't know if my question is clear.
Yeah. Mora Prabhu, did you get his question? Otherwise, I can repeat his question to you.
Yeah, I
okay.
think basically an attempt was made to tell Parikshit Maharaj. There was an attempt made, but as far as I remember, I'll have to look it up again, but Parikshit Maharaj didn't want for Samika Rishi to become embarrassed by having to apologize to him. So he immediately left the place and went to the Ganges River. There was no need for him to apologize. That was Parikshit Maharaj's conviction that this was all the Lord's mercy, and so he took it as such. But an attempt was made on the Rishi on behalf of his son to apologize. But Parikshit Maharaj already accepted the apology without him having to make it. So.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think what you said is what I have also come to know about. So, Anadinidanam, I hope you got the answer.
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else with any question?
Maybe that's good because I have to move flat tonight.
Oh, okay.
So I'm packing all my things.
Srimad Prabhu, you have something to share? Salika, you have something to share before Prabhu goes? Well, I don't know where I slept, but
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, yes.
I think Prabhu wants to go because this question may take maybe a long time.
Okay.
For him.
Okay.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah.
So
we make it next time.
Okay. All right. We'll do that. So at this point, we're going to humbly request all the devotees to kindly unmute, and then we chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to revere the speaker, His Grace, Dayal Mora Prabhu, for being here and giving us his blessings and association. Guys, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare,
Hare
Rama Hare Rama,
Rama, Hare Hare, Panchakalpatruvyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya,
Jai,
Namo Namaha.
Mora Prabhu ki.
Jai.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much for your association. It was a great honor.